All right, folks, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to show you how to make custom signs. Now, whether you want one of these for yourself, for your business, or if you are starting a little woodworking business and want to make some serious profit, I'm going to show you exactly how I make these. They cost very little money to make. They're made with pretty much readily available or free materials, and they hold a serious profit margin. So this is a little bit of a longer video, and that's because I show you literally step by step exactly how I make these and show you all my little tips and tricks along the way. Without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so you gotta start with some pallets. I'm gonna give you the pros tip I know. Okay, because what you want, you're getting these things for free no matter where you go. I got these at Ace Hardware. I feel like Ace Hardware is everywhere and they always give away free pallets, so that would be my recommendation. But listen, here's the deal. Anywhere that sells Quikrete, like the cement company, the big bags of cement, these are gonna be really sturdy. These are actually made out of oak. They have to be really strong pallets in order to support the weight of concrete. So I just feel like you're gonna get a nice high quality pallet made of hardwood. I don't know, anytime I've ever run into them saying Quikrete on the side, I've always had really good luck with them. So that's my go-to. I get these at Ace Hardware. They're always free. I just go out back and get them and no complaints. So now it's time to break this down. I've actually made a really in-depth video about how I break down pallets and remove the nails. It's kind of the most tedious part of this, but again, they're free, so it's worth it. I will link that in the description, so check that out. Basically, I'll show you kind of a quickie version of how I do it, but if you want to know like step by step, the tools I use, the steps I take to break these down and get good high quality wood that can be used, yeah, check that out. So a little different than last time, I got this new Sawzall, which I kind of featured in my deck building video. The only big difference from the last time I broke down pallets was I've got a different blade on here. It's a little bit thicker, but it's carbide and it should be able to cut metal pretty easily. It's just sliding it, you know, in between here might be a little trickier. I don't know, we're gonna try it. So yeah, let's break down this first one. Let's see, I just need a crowbar. Also, does anybody else have one of these? When I run this thing, I get this weird like grease smell. Like it smells like burning grease, but I don't know. I don't know what that smell is. I can't imagine this thing has grease in it, but I don't know. I've used it a lot and it works fine, so. Oh yeah, look at these. These boards have some character here. Sweet, so our pallet wood's processed. I end up running it through the jointer just on each side. Now, a lot of times I run it through the table saw, so I just kind of wanted to try this, but I'm realizing, you'll see when we get there, but I want to do a herringbone pattern, just running these through the jointer once on each side. Yes, it does run a straight line, but those lines aren't parallel, and this board is not the same thickness all the way through. Not to mention this board is not the same thickness as this board, right, and then all the way down through. So that was fun, but I think I'm gonna end up having to run them through the table saw anyway. Let's just let this stuff sit here and then let's move on to making the logo itself. Right about there. Oh, it's nice and warm in here. Let's see here. Oh, I need another board. All right, so this is some 1/2-inch MDF. Now that we've got our pallet wood pretty much prepped, I mean, there's a couple other things we need to do in order to finish it off, but we need something to affix it to, right? We need like a substrate to nail it to, because it's wonky and it's not just gonna glue up. We can't just laminate it together like we would a tabletop. So what I choose to use is 1/2-inch MDF. Well, why did I pick a 1/2-inch MDF? That's what I'm gonna use for the lettering as well. So just kind of 2 birds, 1 stone type of deal. This stuff takes paint really well, and it's super flat because it's manufactured. So basically what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna mark out my backing plate. So this is kind of where I decide how big I want my sign to be. For the building that it's going on the exterior of a building, and just based on the size of the building and the existing sign, we're gonna go with 3 by 5 feet. That's gonna be a great size for this building, and it's also gonna make our lettering that we're gonna put on it nice and big and easy to cut out. What I like to do is, because I can use this sheet for the whole deal, I'm gonna mark out my 5 by 3 backer board, my substrate, and then I'm gonna take the extra and I'm gonna cut that into pieces that fit on my CNC machine. So I am gonna use my CNC machine to cut out the lettering on this, but you don't have to. You could use, I've done this with a scroll saw, I've done it with a jigsaw. I'm just kind of on a tight timeline here. So if I can have my CNC working in the background while I, nail and glue my pallet wood to the substrate, that's just a total bonus. Just 1 sheet right here, 45 bucks for a single sheet of 1/2-inch MDF, which I can use as my substrate and my letters. That's great, right? We're saving money, saving time. So next I'm gonna lay everything out so I can cut it with my skill saw. And let's start marking this out so we know where to cut. So we got our 3 by 5. I lied, I think I'm gonna do like a 20 by 44 on this sheet that's gonna go on the CNC machine. Like I said, it's a 2 by 4 bed on the machine, but I still need like some outside room for clamps so I can clamp it down. We'll just give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room there. This doesn't have to be as accurate. Don't forget to set your depth so you don't get too crazy. Looks like whatever I cut last was 1/2-inch, so we're bang on. Extra. Not sure what you do with that piece. All right, and a little more extra. All right, so here's the 2 pieces that we got out of that sheet of plywood. And actually, we got a whole bunch of extra, I'll show you in a second. Our 3 by 5 backer board, and then basically a 2 by 4 section to cut out all the letters. Obviously, if you put this in the middle of the backer board, you can kind of see the size of the logo. One other thing is I've nested all the letters and pieces to the logo onto that piece of wood so I don't have a ton of scrap. So it'll be actually a little bit bigger than that. Pretty sweet. And then check out all the extra. Look at this, I've got that big section, I've got another big section, and then a little dinker down there. Oh, good grief, look at the spider webs. Oh, this isn't your home, go on. All right, let's bring our stuff back inside, and then we'll pick up from there. All right, that made a big mess. Oh. All right, let's check this thing out. A lot of people are like, oh man, must be nice to have a CNC machine. What a sweet piece of equipment. I'll be honest with you, half the time I can't get this thing to do what I want because I don't use it enough, which I've mentioned a lot. But, if I don't have the time to program this thing and actually do what I want it to do, then I just resort to the bandsaw or the scroll saw. How we looking here? Nice. Looks like it went all the way through. We've got our tabs. So kind of a rarity, but it worked out the way we wanted it to. Love that. Ta-da. All right, we're gonna put this to the side for now, and I wanna show you something else real quick. Since we're multitasking, let's check back in over here. Great, so our backer board here, I think it's time to start cladding this. You'll see I ended up coating this in a couple coats of shellac on each side. This, I feel like, is a perfect opportunity for you to just use up any kind of like leftover finish that you might have in your shop around the house. You could use like deck stain or whatever. It's not going to be seen, but I do think it's important to seal up this MDF on both sides, because what we're going to do next is clad this with the pallet wood, and we're going to be using a lot of glue. And what happens is if you soak one side in glue and it dries, it'll tend to cup. So I just like to try to avoid that by coating the whole thing in some kind of sanding sealer finish. It could be a stain, it could be literally anything. I'd probably try to avoid paint, just because that would possibly peel off when you glue something to it. A good opportunity to use up some of the old leftover half cans of stuff you got kicking around. The other thing I did is I'm doing a herringbone pattern, and just based on the size of this, I drew on with Sharpie just the 5 sections that I want my meeting points to be. I'll explain that when we end up doing it. And then I just measured out where the boards might go and what they would look like, so I can get a rough idea of how long I need to cut them. So I think at this point, we do need to process this pallet wood a little bit more. Now that I'm looking at this, we need to have each piece be the same width and length as the next one in order to get a nice even herringbone pattern. So I think I'm going to first take them over to the miter saw and just cut them each to the length of this, which is 20 inches. And then I'll probably take them to the table saw and rip them down to like 3 inches wide. Let's do that. We'll dork around with this a little bit and just make sure we're on the right track. It's been a while since I did a herringbone pattern, but I'm pretty confident that we can get it done. So off to the miter saw. All right, so we've got all of our wood prepped. That didn't take too long. And look, I got quite a bit here, so I doubt this is probably too much, but that's okay because we can be a little picky choosy. So like if I get a piece that's super warped or something, I can put it to the side and use all the flat stuff. So I mean, this stuff again is free, so I say be picky choosy, make yourself more than you need to, and then if you want to do some kind of pattern, there's a couple different kinds of woods in there. You can do that. So to do this, it's going down with some tight bond too. All right, I got the gallon. It's going to use a lot of glue, and that's why we finished this backer board. And then I'm actually going to install it with a pin nailer. A pin nailer is just these little dinky. Look at these. They're tiny. They're literally like, yeah, they're basically little pins. All right, so those you won't even see them really. And honestly, all they're gonna do is just hold that piece of wood down enough for the glue to dry. This isn't like a very, you can pull these out with a pair of pliers pretty easily. They're not like Brad's, but they're little and they're gonna work great for this application. So yeah, let's get you up top and I'll explain how I'm gonna do this herringbone pattern because it's pretty cool. This is what our board looks like at this point, and remember I said I made some marks, so I just want to explain those really quickly. This is 5 feet wide, so I basically just divided it up into 1 foot sections. So that's why I have these lines going vertically this way. And what those lines dictate is where I want the point of my herringbone pattern to end up. So the idea is it goes like this. That one's flush with that one. And then all of the points, I'll go based off my left hand here. All of the points from my left hand diagonals end up right on those lines. And actually, if I take this away, you'll see that point ends up there and the opposite point ends up on my other line. So that's gonna be nice and even. And you'll see I've drawn a little template right here. This is what told me how big to make these. Okay, so how do we decide how big our pieces are supposed to be? all I did, I took a straight edge, I put my 45-degree square on it. I went from this point, drew it long, right? Because we know that needs to be at a 45-degree angle, and we know we want that far point to land on our vertical line. And then I measured, basically I took my thinnest piece, my most narrow piece, and it was just a little bit more than 3 inches, so I decided, all right, I'm gonna make all of my pieces 3 inches, and that's what we just did on the table saw. So then I drew another parallel line, 3 inches from that, and then I used my square, and then I just took a measurement right here, and you can see that's exactly 20 inches. There's probably a formula to that, because it's 3 inches wide and 20 inches long, and a foot between each 45-degree angle, right? So that's probably like some equation you could just figure out, but that's how I got to mine. So every single one of these pieces is 3 inches wide by 20 inches long, and as you can see, they fit right in perfect. So I'm gonna start with this one, okay, because I know that's where that goes, and I'm gonna use my square periodically here to just make sure I'm following that pattern. And so what I'll do is do one section, we'll call the center line a section, so I'll run these up here, and then your other ones are gonna follow the same pattern. And you can kind of just put them in place. And the biggest thing is you really want to make sure this first line that you're going to build off of is straight and at the right angle and exactly how you want it, because that's going to dictate how the rest of your boards go in. Now you do have a little bit of wiggle room here because of the way the pattern appears when it's finished, but we're going to try to be as precise as we can. I think we just start. Let's give it a shot. If my explanation of that was a little confusing, which I understand it might be, check out some people that have done this with flooring. It's literally the exact same thing. When you buy flooring and do this, or tile even, most of that material is already set to the right size. So as long as you can get this stuff all even and to the right size, it'll go exactly like a flooring project would. So I would recommend checking out how they did that if my explanation was a little confusing. But as you can see, I just kind of worked my way through it, and all these edge pieces, I hung off just a little bit. I ended up cutting them on my miter saw and just hanging the extra off, because here I come back in with my skill saw and then just zip those off so all of my edges are flush with my backer board, and it actually worked really well. It came out nice. I let this dry overnight, and this is the finished product. All right, cool. So our backer board is pretty much done. It's not completely done. I still need to do some edging on it, but I'm gonna do that after we lay out all of our letters for our logo. All right, so we've got our logo cut out. Part of running this thing through the CNC machine is it leaves it with all these, look, can you see how like fluffy this is? It's not a very clean edge. So we need to clean that up. Now, I've done this before with just a sanding pad, right? Takes that off. But a quicker way to do it is one of these guys, just a little Dremel tool, and you can buzz through and buzz all that stuff off, and it leaves a really nice, clean, look at that. See how clean that piece of MDF is now? That's what we want. That's what we're gonna spray with the primer. So this is probably the most tedious piece of this, but yeah, we're gonna go through this whole thing and just clean up all these edges. We'll see you in a couple hours. Sweet. So actually, that wasn't terrible. Hour and a half-ish to sand all this. But the next step is we need to put some finish on this. All right. So if you've seen on Instagram, or at least I've seen on Instagram, these sign makers get this super buttery finish on MDF. And I think the secret is this stuff right here. 2-in-1 filler that's sandable. You know, you're gonna want to obviously prime the MDF before you hit it with spray paint. And I've tried regular primer in the past, and it just takes so many coats, but apparently this stuff is nice and thick and you can sand it. So we're gonna hit it with that. I'm gonna take that to the basement and we'll spray all of this. I don't know how many coats. Basically, I'm just gonna hit it until it has a nice little finish on it that I like. And I might actually even sand in between coats depending on how long it takes. I don't know if you guys have seen this before or if you know the technique to get like that flood coat buttery finish when it comes to signs or when it comes to MDF. Let me know in the comments, because this is kind of my first time doing it with this stuff. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I'm pretty confident that it'll work. Yeah, let me know. Sweet, so here's our lettering, which came out awesome. I mean, hold on, look at the gray. The gray came out really slick. Just super, super buttery, smooth. I think if I had taken a little more time on the edges, it probably would have been smoother on the edges as well, but like I said, I'm kind of in a rush. And then, I mean the black too, check the black out. Just buttery smooth. Super, super happy with the finish on the letters. Yeah, so I'd say that that primer does the trick. For my edging, I actually just took some, if you saw my fence video, built a fence out back, and I just had some leftover 1x4 hemlock, and I ripped it into 1.5 inch strips. And then I hit it with some General Finish black polyurethane. If you've not tried this stuff, I highly recommend it. It's really slick. It actually, I mean, it literally like dyes the wood black, but still leaves, it still leaves the grain. So you can still see the grain really nicely. Hopefully you can see that in this shot. Kind of one of my favorite products. I don't use it much because I don't paint a ton of stuff, but I really, really like it. And so next up, I don't have any finish on this yet, okay? I had thought about doing a UV finish. I wanted to use Total Boat Gleam, hit the pallet wood first so it gets a little bit of UV protection because this is gonna be outside. And then I wanted to glue this stuff on and then epoxy everything over it so you get like a super weatherproof finish. But Total Boat Gleam calls for 48 hours to recoat and 7 days to like put a finish coat on it. And I just don't have that. I don't have the 7 days. So we're gonna leave it bare for now. It's gonna help the glue stick to it so our letters adhere really well. The only downside is it won't have the UV protection, but I don't know that that's a huge deal either way. Next, we're gonna glue down these letters. I'm gonna use Star Bond thick super glue to adhere them because it's fast and it's super strong. I have a link in the description if you want to purchase some of that stuff. They're a sponsor of mine. And then as far as laying it out goes, I basically just take my CAD drawing. I mean, you're gonna have to do something like this if you're making a sign anyway. So whatever you use to design your stencil, I've pulled some dimensions, which is gonna help me lay this out. I use painter's tape, a big straight edge. Nothing fancy, especially with this background. It's kind of chaotic, so you do get a little bit of wiggle room as far as like layout goes, but we want to try to get everything as straight and even and looking as much like that logo as we possibly can. I'm gonna put you back up top and I'll explain how I'm laying this out as I do it. I'm strategically placing this painter's tape on the outside of the logo, so all the vertical strips are touching the outermost pieces of the logo, and the horizontal strips I like to place at the tops of the writing or even the bottoms, depending on which is the flattest. So the tops in this case, and then you'll see the outsides of that barbell and the top of the Vermont, the bottom of the Vermont. So that kind of just gives me an idea where to line things up. Oh yeah, check this out. This is, yeah, pretty happy with this. So we're all glued up. This glue is gonna take a little bit to dry. This is honestly kind of a tricky logo because the Vermont in the background is kind of a goofy shape. I mean, I live here and I know that, but it's not like a perfect rectangle. If that was like Oklahoma, that'd be sweet, but it's not. You know, this is almost perfect, but the buttery, buttery black, I believe, is a flat black, which I should have gone with. No big deal. Because we're on pallet wood, there are some gaps under the letters, but don't worry about that because next I'm gonna put on the this trim. So that's gonna cover up this little section here that you see. because I don't want like the edges showing, and that's also a sneaky spot for water to get in. So I'm gonna miter those and glue those on. And then to finish this, like I said, I'm just gonna do a huge flood coat. So I'm gonna use a ton of tabletop epoxy. I mean, I don't want it to like fill the whole vast thing, but I wanna like flood coat it so everything is nice and smooth. You'll see when we get there. I'm running on like hour 9 of this project, so excuse me if I get a little confusing. Yes, let's put the trim on, then we'll mix up some epoxy. I'll probably prep by putting some plastic down so I don't like trash my shop. That stuff will not come off your floor or your clothes. Whew, okay, let's do it. Okay, wow. So check it out, it's dry. It's been 24 hours. Here's what I love. All of my lettering, everything I cut out of MDF is like super smooth, glassy smooth, and the pallet wood is actually a little bit rough looking. I was afraid this whole thing was gonna look like super wet, like somebody had just dunked it in epoxy, but it doesn't. This is the effect I was not going for, but hoping for. I just cut up some foam here. I'm gonna tape down foam to all the important bits here, and then we'll flip it over, and there's something I want to show you. So yeah, let's flip it. Okay, it's flipped over. If you've ever done a flood coat with epoxy, you get these like little knobs. They're basically drips that don't drip all the way, and then obviously it's epoxy, so it cures, and you're left with these knobs. Before I put anything on the back, I'm just gonna take my flush trim router and just buzz it off flush to the back. All those little nubs are gone. We've got a flat back, and basically we're ready to, well, we could probably go install it. We could hang it, but how are we gonna hang it? Something this big and this heavy. I've got an answer, don't worry. So thanks to the French, they didn't only give us the French fry, they gave us the French cleat. What's a French cleat? This is my favorite way to hang big stuff like this. Honestly, you could probably hang small stuff, but big stuff, it really shines. All I've done, I took a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and I ripped a few strips off of it. I wish I had one that was 48 inches long, but unfortunately, all I had was this one. So I ended up doubling it up and just cutting 24-inch pieces, but we'll stick them together and make 48. So you need to rip off a couple of strips. I just went with some 5-inchers, and then rip off something maybe double the size. I went with 9 inches. And then once you've got a 9-inch piece, you're going to rip that directly in half at a 45-degree angle, and then you end up with something like this, right? So we ripped it in half. Now boom. Okay, so for a French cleat, we're gonna install one of our 45s, basically somewhere on the top half. I actually like to go maybe top third-ish if I can. So that's gonna get installed somewhere in there, and then the other half of it is gonna get stuck to whatever you're sticking this to. So, or whatever you wanna hang this on. In our case, it's a building. So this piece will get stuck to a building, and now picture us hanging this up, and we just basically lift it up over whatever we stuck to the building, and then we drop it down, and that French cleat comes back together. Of course, this is stuck to that, this is stuck to whatever you're hanging on, and it's installed, okay? So it just hangs there. But one thing I like to do is, I cut these other strips, these 4 or 5 inchers earlier. I like to put those down here, because what happens is this actually, it stands your piece off of whatever you're hanging it to by the thickness of your board. So in my case, it's 3/4 inch. And then this just takes up the gap on the bottom, so it sits flush against the building. Pretty easy. So I like to install the 45s, like the top part of the French cleat, on the first third of my sign, and then that guy can go anywhere on the lower third of my sign. And then to really secure it, I end up just running 2 screws right through the bottom, hopefully somewhere. This is pallet wood, so I can pick a couple of holes and just screw it right to the building, and then that locks it in place so it literally cannot come off. Can't come off the bottom because it's got screws through it. Can't come off of here because our 45-degree cut is holding it in place. So really slick, super easy. Use whatever you got kicking around for this part. You won't see it. Definitely my go-to. So let's install those. All right, so these things are going on with some wood glue because we're just gluing right to the MDF. And I ended up using some 1.25" just regular old wood screws to attach those countersunk. And then I painted everything black so it kind of blends in. This is where I'm hanging this sign. I didn't put these 2x4s up where this is going. This was where the old sign was, but they're already anchored into the studs in the metal building, so I'm just going based off that. And you'll see they're not exactly even, so whoever put these up didn't do an amazing job, but we can work with it, and it's got plenty of holding power. Those I sunk in with some 3-inch deck screws, and then these two bottom ones are some 4 inches. Well, folks, there you have it. I love the way this sign came out. The client's very happy with it, and I actually go to that gym, so I should be able to see it every single day. I want to thank you again for watching. If you have any questions or comments or things you would do differently, as always, leave those in the comments, and I will list everything I use down in the description. So if you're curious where I got this stuff, if you need to get it online, shoot down there. It really helps me out if you click on that link. And hey, maybe even like shop for something else. If you click on my link and search Amazon, I end up getting a little kickback. So we appreciate that, and we will see you next time.